everybody, welcome to my studio. My name is Leo. In the today's video we're gonna do a demo review of the Marshall SC20, that stands for Studio Classic 20. The Studio Classic 20 is part of a series of heads and combos that Marshall has released in order to bring back the Classic but in a smaller format. These amps are called the Studio Vintage, the Studio Jubilee and the Studio Classic. That is the one we're going to review together now. If you follow my channel, you know that in my previous video I've reviewed the Marshall SV20, the Studio Vintage 20, which is a recreation of a Plexi in a smaller format. Please find a link to the video in the card up above. These new amps are a downsized 20 watt version of some of the most iconic amps of the 60s, 70s and 80s. More specifically, the Studio Vintage, called SV20, is based on the JMP 1959 SLP, known as the Plexi, which was the amp that defined classic rock tone with its plexiglass panel seen on the 100 watts amp in the late 60s. Then we have the Studio Classic, called SC20, that is a portable replica of the classic JCM 800 2203, which was originally introduced in the 80s. At that time, it offered more overdrive than the Plexi, making it an heavy metal hero. Then the last one is the Studio Jubilee, that is a smaller version of the Silver Jubilee. The Silver Jubilee was originally released in 1987 to mark 25 years of Marshall. Each amp in the Studio series is all tube and built in UK, bringing the beloved Marshall tone down to an ideal size for small venues and home studios. Now let's focus on the SC20H, listing his main characteristics. It is handcrafted in UK, setting it apart for instance from the Origin series that I have reviewed in my channel, and it is made in Vietnam. Please find the link to the video in the card above. It is a non-switchable one-channel amp with 3 EC83 preamp valves, one is a phase splitter, and 2 EL34 power amp valve, where the JCM 800 has 4 of them. It is a master volume amp, where for instance the Studio Vintage is a non-switchable 2-channel amp without master volume. And this is one of the main difference between the SC20 and the SV20, and obviously between the Plexi and the JCM 800. The dimensions are weight 9.4 kilos, where the JCM weight 20.5 kilos, so more than double, 510 mm of width, height 240 mm, depth 240 mm. It comes with a detachable power cable and a speaker cable included in the package. Now let's see together a detailed amp description. Starting from the front panel, from left to right, we have the on-off switch, the output power switch that can be used to select between 20 watt in the lower position, 5 watt in the upper position, or standby in the middle position. Then we have the presence knob that increases the high frequencies of the power amp section of the amp, also adding more bite to the sound. Then we have the equalization section with bass, middle and treble knobs. Then we have the master volume that set the overall volume of the amp. And then we have the preamp volume that set the overdrive level of the preamp valves. The master volume is the bigger difference between this amp and the SV20 or the Plexi, because the master volume in the JCM 800 series gives you the possibility to basically crank the preamp valves. We will talk again about this argument in the more sound section further in the video. Then we have the high sensitivity and the low sensitivity inputs for the guitar. We will test the differences in the more sound section further in the video. Let's move to the back panel. From left to right, we have the 5 jack output sockets to select 16 ohm, 8 ohm or 4 ohm speaker load. The first one is the 16 ohm speaker connection, then we have the 8 ohm speaker connection that should be used in conjunction with socket number 3 when plugging in 2 by 16 ohm cabinets. Then we have the other 8 ohm speaker connection that should be used in conjunction with socket number 2 when plugging in 2 by 16 ohm cabinet. Then we have the 4 ohm speaker connection that should be used in conjunction with socket number 5 when plugging in 2 by 8 ohm cabinets, and the last speaker connection that is still 4 ohm and that should be used in conjunction with socket number 4 when plugging in 2 by 8 ohm cabinets. Then we have the DI output that can be used in order to connect the amp to an external recording device or sound desk or mixer. Please notice that this DI output has added loudspeaker emulation. So if you record this amp through the DI output, you shouldn't use any cabinet simulation software in your digital audio workstation. Then we have the loop switch that turns the effect loop of the amp on or off to completely remove the loop from the signal path when switched off, in order to have the most pristine and direct signal chain inside the amp. Finally, we have the last 2 input jacks dedicated to the effect loop, obviously called send and return. So now let's hear some more sound. Let's start from the signal chain. I have my Sir Classic Antique S that then is going to the Marshall, that then is going to a Sir Reactive Load, then in a API 512 preamplifier, in a Lynx Aurora converter, and then straight in the computer. In the computer I have loaded the Torpedo Wall of Sound plugin with these settings. Now let's start from some distorted sound, some overdriven sound from the song at the beginning of the video. Okay, so as in the song at the beginning of the video we heard some distorted sound, let's focus now on clean sounds. Let's start with the low sensitivity input with basically everything to none but the preamp volume and the master volume. So, as you may have noticed, the sound is really missing high frequencies. Now let's move to the high sensitivity input. I have to drop down the volume because it's different, it's huge. So as you may have noticed, high frequencies are back and the sound is even much more louder and a little bit too much overdriven in my opinion for a clean sound. Let's try to dig it even more in the settings to try to have a cleaner sound. So as you may have noticed, to obtain a clean sound, I have to really drop down the preamp volume and the master volume and to raise the level of the preamplifier volume. Now let's go in more overdriven territories. Another important thing to notice is that this amp has a preamp volume and a master volume. The master volume is the real difference between this amp and the Plexi or the SV20 that I have reviewed in my channel. Yes, because the SV20 doesn't have a preamp knob. You cannot adjust the distortion of the preamp valve. But in order to crank it, you have to set the overall volume of the amp to the maximum level. With this amp, you have a little bit more flexibility because you can crank the preamp valves using the preamp volume, or you can crank the power amp valves using the master volume. Let's hear the difference. Now I'm cranking the preamp valves. And now I'm cranking the power amp valve, so I'm setting the volume to its maximum level. Let's try once more. So to me, the dynamic and the frequency response is really different between the two types of distortion. I mean, the one you obtain from the preamp valves and the one you obtain from the power amp valves. Basically, just to simplify, in my opinion, when you crank the volume, the master volume, you obtain a more dynamic sound and a more glassy tone. On the other side, when you crank the preamp valves, you obtain a less dynamic amp with a warmer tone. So thank you very much for following me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did it, please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification button. It would be of a great help. See you in the next video. Bye bye.